Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this amazing Thursday afternoon. And it's Thursday night football, so be ready for that. If you guys are interested in football and want to hear anything about football, then we have several football podcasts where where we have other hosts that host football podcasts. And if you guys are interested in the games that are going down tonight, I believe that there's going to be a sports podcast directly after my basketball podcast. And I believe TJ is going to probably talk about his predictions for the Thursday night matchup tonight, if you guys are interested in that. So just wanted to recommend some of those football podcasts as well. And before I begin, you guys aren't here to talk about football. We're here to talk basketball. So we're doing this. In the first segment, we are going to look at LeBron James's finals record, and we are going to analyze it, and we are going to see why exactly he has a 4-6 record, a losing record, and why he's known as and why that's so prevalent for his career. So we're going to talk about his finals record. And then in the second segment, we're going to do a preseason recap. And I'm mainly going to talk about the Golden State Warriors and their preseason matchup against the Sacramento Kings, given how they made 28 three-pointers in that preseason matchup. So we're talking about that. Then in the third segment, I'm going to continue looking at the anonymous GM polls. And we're going to focus on the defensive side of the ball this time. So they'll talk about like the teams that they feel like are the best defensive teams. They're going to talk about the players that feel like they're the best defensive players. And we're going to go ahead and look at that poll in the third segment. And then in the fourth segment, we're going to touch on Danny Green's retirement. He retired from basketball. He was a fantastic shooter and a fantastic role player for 3 championship teams. So we're going to talk about that in the fourth segment. And we have a very special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. It's a little bit sad, and it's a little bit of an unfortunate story, but still I'm going to talk about it because I feel like it is important. And with that out of the way, I'd like to remind everybody that we love what you guys have to hear during the show. We love to hear what you guys have to say, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something you've been dying to share. We are all ears, and if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. Just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can go ahead and send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, then that's totally fine. You could always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. And let's get right into it. Let's start talking about LeBron, and let's talk about that finals record. So, as you guys know, LeBron James, in my opinion, is the greatest basketball player to ever set foot on a basketball court. He has, simply put, he has been better for a longer period of time against much stronger competition. And on top of that, his performances in very important situations and in playoff series especially, they're absolutely legendary. However, every single time you mention LeBron is the greatest of all time, or anyone that believes that always has to deal with any sort of other fans or NBA fans or NBA haters of LeBron, that his finals record is 4-6. And a big reason why Michael Jordan is considered the greatest of all time is because Michael Jordan never lost in the finals. But there's never any context to any of these losses. No one ever gives a reason why LeBron lost. No one ever gives the reason why Jordan won all of those finals. The only thing that they talk about and the only thing that they look at is the face value of the record. They don't bother to bring up context, and I feel like context is a very, very important thing when you're talking about sports, not just basketball, in every single sport. And to say that LeBron has a 4-6 record and only look at that as the reason why he's not the best basketball player of all time is not only shallow-minded, but it's completely unfair. Incredibly unfair. And it just gives Jordan an advantage in these kinds of conversations as opposed to LeBron, who gets a disadvantage for something that tends to be out of his control. And we're going to go ahead and talk about that. So a lot of people, whenever they think of LeBron in the postseason, or a lot of LeBron haters, they will always go ahead and look at Ray Allen and Kyrie Irving's clutch three-pointers that helped him win 2 of his 4 NBA titles. And completely ignoring the fact that before Ray Allen hit that three-pointer, LeBron ended up scoring 16 points in that fourth quarter, as well as hitting one of the most important threes to put Ray Allen in that situation to tie the game. And they also forget LeBron dropping a triple-double in that exact same Game 7 that Kyrie Irving hit the game-winning three over Stephen Curry. And they completely forget all of that, and they only look at the fact that, oh, Kyrie hit the three, LeBron got bailed out. Or, oh, Ray Allen hit the three, LeBron got bailed out. That's the only thing that they look at that. And I'm here to say that there's a lot of context to these finals losses. We're only going to look at his losses because everybody knows that when he won, and no one likes talking about when he won. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about when he lost. So his first finals loss, this was in year 4. In year 4, he lost in the NBA Finals and was forced to go up against the dynasty San Antonio Spurs, who had Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker, as well as several other fantastic role players on that loaded squad. The Spurs have been good for a very long time for a very good reason because of Tim Duncan and the rest of the squad that was behind him. And expecting someone who only has 4 years of experience in the NBA to beat a team that had multiple experiences under their belt, as well as have already won a championship before, is just an inhumane kind of task. There's no way that anyone expects any sort of year 4 player to win a title. Do you guys expect Victor to win a title at year 4? I don't think so. Did people expect Giannis to win a title in year 4? I don't think so. Did people expect Kobe to win a title in year 4 without the help of Shaq? I don't think so. Shaq didn't even win in the span of 4 years. And there's so many other players that it's like, it takes time and it takes a very fantastic team. Expecting somebody in year 4 of their career to go up against a dynasty caliber team is inhumane. It's completely inhumane. It's unfair. And that's final series number 1 that he lost. Second final series that he lost was, of course, the Dallas Mavericks. And I'm not going to talk about that series because everybody who is anybody knows about that final series. Everyone knows that LeBron didn't play well. Everyone knows that he was the reason why the Miami Heat ended up losing in that finals. And to that, I say, yes, he is the reason why they lost in the finals. However, people always forget, whenever they compare him to Jordan, that there were times where Jordan didn't make the finals. There were also times when Jordan came back from retirement, they give him the excuse that he wasn't at 100%, despite the fact that he was averaging 30 points in the finals and still lost. Yet, he doesn't get blamed for that. He doesn't get blamed for that early exit in the postseason. Meanwhile, if LeBron does that, he gets blamed for the loss entirely, and you'll see why later. Next time they lost, after winning back-to-back with the Miami Heat, they matched up against the Spurs again. This time, the starting lineup on the Spurs was so incredibly balanced, and the lineup was so ridiculous that you could have picked Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, or even Kawhi Leonard to win the Finals MVP that year, and everyone would have been fine with that. Not to mention the San Antonio Spurs, they were shooting the absolute lights out in that game. And part of when you're a team that takes a lot of threes, part of winning is down to luck. And I'm sorry to say this, but yes, part of winning in these kinds of series, when you take a bunch of threes like that, it's going to be down to luck. Look at what happened again when the Houston Rockets went up against the Golden State Warriors in 2018. Houston Rockets, they were 1 game away from closing out the Warriors in the series. Then Chris Paul gets hurt, and then they missed 27 straight three-pointers. That is incredibly unlucky, because if they would have hit at least 2 or maybe 3 three-pointers in that span where they missed 27 straight, they would have ended up winning that game. So you live by the 3, you die by the 3. In this matchup, they ended up living by the 3. It also did not help that Dwayne Wade, in that playoff series, averaged 15 points along with 3 turnovers while only averaging 2 assists. And Bosh was only averaging 14 points in that playoff series. So the big 3 and the stacked team that everyone said that LeBron had in that finals did not show up and failed to show up. I mean, you're not going to win a series when your second best player is playing really bad, averaging 15 points and more turnovers than assists. That's just not going to happen. Meanwhile, LeBron is out there averaging 28 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, somewhere around that category. I forget exactly what the numbers were, but he did average 28 points in that series. Yet, people still blame him for losing that playoff series. Then, in the first finals matchup, when he returned to Cleveland and matched up against the Golden State Warriors for the first time, LeBron averaged 36, 13, and 9 against the Warriors, but Kyrie Irving was injured, leaving LeBron with the rest of the Cavs lineup to go up against Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, along with Harrison Barnes as well as a very solid option, and Andre Iguodala, who ended up winning the Finals MVP. That is an incredibly stacked team, and I don't think anyone should expect one player averaging 36, 13, and 9 to win the series. Like, clearly, it was not LeBron's fault, averaging 36, 13, and 9. If you think it's LeBron James' fault for losing that Finals, then you have to argue with a wall. I don't understand how you could think that. Then, the team, when they were healthy, ended up beating that exact same Warriors team that beat them the previous year by coming back 3-1. What does Golden State do? They get Kevin Durant. And a 73-9 team with Kevin Durant on the roster, there is no team in the history of basketball that was going to beat that team. Absolutely none. And there was none at the time that was able to beat that Golden State Warriors team. LeBron in that series averaged 34, 12, and 10, became the first player in NBA history to average a triple-double in the finals. And he lost because Kevin Durant was averaging 32 points alongside with the starting lineup consisted of Steph, Klay, and Draymond Green. Like, that is an unfair matchup. You can't expect anyone to win against that team. Then it's the same story in 2018 because LeBron in that 2018 final series averaged 34, 9, and 10, almost a triple-double again. But now he didn't have Kyrie on the roster because Kyrie ended up requesting a trade that sent him to Boston in 2018. And again, you cannot expect one player to be able to beat 4 Hall of Famers all in their prime in the exact same series. Like, it's inhumane. Like, the team was just so ridiculously talented compared to the Cavs team that had LeBron. Not to mention the fact that the Cavs actually could have won Game 1, but for some reason J.R. Smith decides to walk out because he thinks that they were up. Like, how can you blame LeBron for that? Why does LeBron get any kind of blame for these kinds of losses? The only time when LeBron should be blamed for a loss in the finals was in 2011. Aside from that, every other final series that he's played in was incredibly unfair. There was no even playing field. He had to go up against the Dynasty Spurs when he was in his 4th year. You're not going to be able to win. He was 18 years old when he got drafted, so 4 years. That's roughly 21, 22 years old, going up against a dynasty. Like, seriously? You expect a 22 or a 21-year-old to win against a dynasty? I don't think so. Then, in the matchup I'm just reiterating what I said, against Golden State, he was the only player in the first final series that actually played good. And then in the last 2 years where he lost against Golden State, the team was just ridiculously stacked. I mean, it's an unfair comparison, and it's unfair to LeBron that he's the one that gets blamed for these losses, and everyone looks at these finals losses as his fault, saying, oh, he's 4-6 in the finals, as if he could have done anything about it. Because he tried to do everything about it, but it still just proved ineffective. So that's all that I had to say. This segment was a long time coming, as you guys know how I feel about LeBron James. So that's it for the first segment. Now we're going to go ahead and go into our preseason recap, where I mainly focus on the Golden State Warriors game against the Kings, because this could spell some good news for Golden State. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, losing it. The noose, if it's some loose shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, we are going to be we're doing a preseason recap of all of the games. I'm mainly going to focus on the Golden State Warriors game, though, because it was a very impressive game that the Warriors played in this one. Before I begin, however, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something you've just been dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. Just click on the $sign below the chat box and you can go in and send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, then that's totally fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker as well, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the second segment, which is going to be a preseason recap. We're going to start with the Warriors going up against the Kings. So the Warriors, they ended up winning 122-112. Now, you might think it was a pretty close game, considering how the point differential was only 10 towards the very end. And the Kings, they were able to keep up with the Golden State Warriors. Now, the Warriors in this matchup in the preseason made 28 three-pointers. They shot 28 of 52 from three. That is 53%, which is absolutely incredible. And I talked about how the Warriors, they don't really have that much depth at the center position, and that could be a big weakness. But when they're making threes like this, it ultimately just makes all of the weaknesses that they have irrelevant. However, I will say that just relying on the three ball doesn't necessarily, wield long-term success. Like, you have to be very, very lucky if you're going to be a team that is heavily reliant on the three-point shot, because bad shooting nights happen. And when other teammates are having a bad shooting night, it can snowball effect into the rest of the team having a bad shooting night. So it's a little bit of think of it like a high-risk, high-reward kind of offensive system. And we saw this system ran by the Houston Rockets before, when they relied heavily on the three-point shot under James Harden and Chris Paul. And not only that, Russell Westbrook as well. They made a very strictly three-point shooting lineup when Russell Westbrook was on the roster, as they went small. So if the Warriors are thinking of doing something similar, running four guards in the starting lineup, yes, their three-point shooting could be very much improved. However, their defense is also going to be lacking. Now, if they can shoot the lights out like this in every single game, I wouldn't have a problem. However, shooting 53% from three as a team is very, very rare to do consistently, and it's not like it's not a very common thing to do. And not only that, to be able to maintain that for the entirety of the season, the regular season, 82 games, not to mention the postseason when the pressure gets almost too much for so many players. It's a very, very difficult task. And I think that, having defense as something to fall back on, especially when you're a team that's really, really heavy on the three-point shot, is essential. Because if you have a bad shooting night, you need competent defense to sort of keep you in the game long enough until you can find that shooting touch again. And the fact that Golden State might not have it could spell good news or it could spell bad news. Again, it's all going to be dependent on how they shoot at any given night. And they're sort of forcing themselves to try and stay consistent. And to try and stay consistent for 82 games is not ideal. Especially once the postseason rolls around, where you have to play a little bit more games. Not to mention the possibility of them playing in the play-in games, which would mean they'd have to be more consistent in those games, since it's single-game elimination, depending on where the seed is. And, it's a very, very difficult task. Now, on top of the fact that the Kings, they were somewhat able to keep up in this matchup as well when they were scoring all of those points. Let me just go ahead and look at the play-by-play. Let me go ahead and look at the box scores. Yes, so, the Kings, they ended up... The big problem for the Kings right here was essentially the third quarter. And in the third quarter, that was when the Golden State Warriors ended up completely outscoring them. And it's that kind of quarter that ended up winning the game for the Golden State Warriors. And, you're sort of reliant on that. And I don't really think that's something you can sustain long term. That's my thoughts on this game, and that's my thoughts on making so many three-pointers. Wasn't really much memorable performances coming from individual players in this matchup, as opposed to how it was just overall fantastic shooting from the team. That was really the big highlight. Now, we're going to continue with the preseason recap, and we're going to talk about the Knicks matching up against the Wizards. So, Karl-Anthony Towns played 28 minutes, ended the game with 25 points and 12 rebounds. So, already making an impact for the New York Knicks. He did go 1 for 7 from 3, which is not ideal, but still, 25 points and 12 rebounds along with the win. That's a good enough performance. And against a team like the Wizards, it seems like the Wizards are going to continue being a mediocre team. Alexander Sarr played pretty solid in this matchup. 12 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. And he did end up shooting 5 for 12, which seems to be a very common problem with Alexander Sarr, his inefficiency. And being someone who's a 7-footer, you can't be that inefficient as a 7-footer. I'm sorry to say this, but there's just no way you're going to be winning basketball games if you're that inefficient as a big man. And ironically, I say that despite Karl-Anthony Towns going 1 for 7 from 3, but the team is good enough to be able to, sort of not really pillow, but like sort of shield Karl-Anthony Towns from sort of playing all that bad. Like, they have a very deep team, and Jalen Brunson played fantastic as well with 23 points, and Mikal Bridges, had 16 points and 5 rebounds, along with 3 steals in this game as well. Bridges, for some reason, was playing 31 minutes in this game, but he is Iron Man for the NBA. He plays every single game, so not really surprised by that. I do hope that his minutes do get a little bit limited as the preseason continues, because you do not want to see him injured, even though he's a very durable basketball player. And let's see, who else played well for the Knicks? Tyler Kolek ended up went 6 for 10, had 15 points in this game. Cameron Payne was 5 for 12. However, he ended the game with 14 points, so it's respectable. Landry Shamet was inefficient, 1 for 7 from 3 with only 6 points, 2 for 10 from the field. But again, still good enough to beat the Wizards, who seem to be stuck in the same place as they were before. And that's Jordan Poole for you, ladies and gentlemen. Just an utter disappointment on the Washington Wizards, and he shot 4 for 13 in the preseason, 1 for 7. Expect a lot of those kinds of performances from Jordan Poole if you are a Wizards fan. So, next game, the Houston Rockets actually ended up beating the Thunder in overtime. They won 122-113, and Dylan Brooks had 15 points. Sengun had 17 and 9. And let's see, who else played well? Jalen Green ended the game with 12 points. Now, the bench obviously saw a little bit more playing time than the starting lineup. Jalen Green showed his inefficiency once again, going 3 for 12 from the field and 3 of 9 from 3. But still, it was good enough to beat the Thunder, despite the fact that SGA didn't really play all that many minutes. He only played 19, ended the game with 15 points. And there's no doubt in my mind that if he would have played the entirety of this game, then the Oklahoma City Thunder would have won. So it is a good win for the Thunder. Well, not a good win for the Thunder, but it was a good game from the Thunder, who were able to force an overtime despite not having SGA. So we'll see how the season goes, and we'll see if they can maintain that 1 seed that they've always maintained, that they've had recently in the most recent season. And again, I don't really expect the Thunder to slow down. I only expect them to get better, given how young their lineup is and how good SGA is. Now, the San Antonio Spurs ended up... This one was actually a really big one, because Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul connection seems to be beautiful already. And it was highlighted by Chris Paul throwing a lob to Victor Wembanyama. There was a defender under the basket, and Victor said, "I don't see him. Let me just dunk the ball." And he dunked the ball over him pretty easily. And this is honestly just a sign for the not just the season to come, but also like the years to come with Victor Wembanyama. And not only that, the fact that the Spurs have a solid point guard, well, not really a solid point guard, but in Chris Paul, but that's not who I was talking about. They recently acquired that point guard from UConn, excuse me. And if he's a solid piece, like if he's a very solid piece to this offense, like he could learn a lot from Chris Paul, and he could, Chris Paul can show him the ropes, and not only that, but Chris Paul can also be the voice and the leader of this team and elevate Victor Wembanyama's play. Basically, what Chris Paul is going to do is he's going to say, hey, whenever that 7-footer is under the basket, throw the ball up in the air and he'll catch it. Like, I don't know why it took Chris Paul being on the team in order for the players to realize that, but I digress. Banchero ended the game with 6 points, 17 minutes. He didn't, again, it's 17 minutes, so I don't really expect Paolo Banchero to really play all that well in the allotted time that he has. He went 3 for 6 from the field, so, still rather efficient. And the rest of this team, the rest of the Orlando Magic, again, not many of the starters have been playing all that much, so we do have to see how it will develop during the rest of the season. But I do expect a pretty solid year from the Orlando Magic, despite this loss to the San Antonio Spurs. So that's all that I have for my preseason recap. And now we're going to go ahead and continue on with the anonymous GM polls. And this time we're going to focus on the defensive side of the ball. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, hold on just one second, let me just move this here. There we go. We are going to go ahead and continue looking at the anonymous GM polls. And this time we're going to focus on the defense. So the GMs, they ended up doing several votes for defense. There were, let's see, let me go right ahead and just view them. So there's a poll on who they think is the best defensive player, who they think is the best perimeter defensive player, who they think is the best interior defensive player, most versatile, and the best team defense. So we're going to go ahead and look at all of that in this one segment. And we have enough time to do that because, ironically, the player that they choose tends to be the same for a lot of these categories. But we're going to go right ahead. So they first were asked a question on who they felt was the best defensive player in the NBA, like period, best defensive player. And of course, it was Victor Wembanyama. He dominated this polling. He was clear-cut first place pick for the best defender in the NBA. 40% of the GMs ended up voting in favor of Victor Wembanyama, and there was a three-way tie for second. Bam Adebayo got 10% of the votes, Rudy Gobert got 10% of the votes, and Drew Holiday as well got 10% of the votes. And, it's clear-cut to me that Victor Wembanyama is the best defender in the entire NBA. His rim protection is just clear-cut, and more clear-cut than it is for a lot of some of these other players in their rim protection, mainly Rudy Gobert. And again, it's just a phenomenal game. It's just a phenomenal defensive game that Victor Wembanyama plays, and he's only going to get better. This was his rookie season, and I expect his defense to greatly improve as the years go on. And I also expect teams to be more aware of Victor Wembanyama's presence in the paint and maybe not go up with some shots because, they're afraid of getting blocked, which already happened in the previous season. There were several teams that ended up passing up one-on-three fast breaks because Victor Wembanyama was in the paint, and they were all like, yeah, no, I'm not taking a layup over the 7'4" guy. That's absolutely ridiculous. You're asking me to get sent. And that's usually the case. And one of the most memorable times when that happened, Christian Braun was ahead of Victor Wembanyama on one play, and he chose not to take the wide open layup because he was afraid Victor would block him. Instead, opted in giving the ball to Michael Porter, who was wide open for three. Of course, Michael Porter shot it and ended up making the shot. So we're already seeing the impact on Victor Wembanyama's defense. And some other players that were that got recognized for their defensive talents. Giannis Antetokounmpo ended up getting 7% of the votes. Anthony Davis also ended up getting 7%, and so did Herb Jones for the New Orleans Pelicans. And players that were also receiving votes were Alex Caruso, Jaden McDaniels, and Marcus Smart for Memphis. And, obviously Victor was going to be the clear-cut favorite for who was going to be the best overall defender. Now, who did GMs think was the best perimeter defender? Well, it was Drew Holiday, and really no complaints around there either. He was picked for second-team all-defense alongside with Derek White, and he received 43% of the votes for being the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Now, other worthy players that were considered for a vote, Alex Caruso ended up getting 20%, Herb Jones ended up getting 17%, and Lou Dort for Oklahoma City ended up getting 7%. Other players that received votes were OG Anunoby, Jaden McDaniels, again, Marcus Smart, again, and Derek White, again. And, I think it's clear-cut that Drew Holiday was the best perimeter defender of last season, and so deserves to be the best perimeter defender going into this season until proven otherwise. And to be fair, the entire... in the entire Celtics roster, Drew Holiday is clear-cut the best perimeter defender. And that's saying a lot because Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum are also very competent perimeter defenders as well. There is somebody in the chat as well. Anthony Manzano, what's going on? So he has a comment about the earlier segment about LeBron. For me, the reason why LeBron has that record in the finals is I think his fans I overrate him just a little bit. I give respect to LeBron. He's a great player. No! LeBron is not overrated. In fact, there is an argument that can be made that he is actually the most underrated player in the entire history of basketball, making 8 straight finals in a row, and he gets insulted for that because he couldn't win in most of them, even though it wasn't his fault. And I've never really heard of anyone make it to 8 straight finals and still get called a bad playoff performer, still get mentioned for his bad finals record. Like, making the finals, as we've seen in the last few years, is not easy to do consistently. There have been multiple different teams that have made the finals over the last 6 years, and the fact that LeBron has been able to do it for 8 straight is nothing short of impressive, but of course he gets criticized for it. And he continues going on, but he is not as much of a generational talent as his hardcore fans make him out to be. Yes, he is. And the reason why a lot of hardcore fans make him out to be that talent is because there are a bunch of haters and a bunch of people that don't think that LeBron's talents are worthy that kind of respect due to his finals record. So LeBron is, in my opinion, underrated in certain fans. And it's really just that's literally just how it is. He's made it to 8 straight. No other player has been able to do that consistently. And Manzano continues going, and this is why I can't stand LeBron fans, man. Late, they blame everything around LeBron, but not put the blame on him. If you watch the previous segment, then you'll see why I don't put the blame on him for that final segment. He averaged a triple-double in the finals, yet still lost. How is that his fault? Averaged 34, 9, and 10, still lost. Don't know how that's his fault. Averaged 28, 8, and 8 around those numbers in the finals against the Spurs, but still lost because Dwayne Wade was averaging 15 and Chris Bosh was averaging 14. And then in this fourth year, ended up losing to the Spurs because the Spurs were an incredibly talented team, and he was in his fourth year. The only loss that really is LeBron's fault is, as I said before, the Mavs. That's really the only finals loss where he has any sort of blame, because his performances are just too good to even blame him on any of these performances. But as fans, they still blame him because, of course, it's LeBron. You can watch the entirety of that segment. I explain it in complete detail. And I kind of want to continue. I will acknowledge your comment afterwards, but I do want to continue with this segment and cover some of the best defenders in this league. Now, the GMs were also asked a question on who the best interior defender was, and of course it's going to be Victor. I mean, I would be completely surprised if it was anyone else. It was a close battle though in the voting. He received 40% of the votes. Rudy Gobert ended up receiving 30% of the votes. Anthony Davis ended up receiving 10%. Bam Adebayo ended up receiving 7%. And other players that were also voted for were Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jaren Jackson Jr. for Memphis. And I mean, Victor, I think it's clear cut that Victor is the best rim protector. He is the tallest player on the court almost every single time. It makes absolutely no sense not putting him as one of the best rim protectors in the entire NBA. And the GMs were also asked who they feel is the most versatile defender, and it's not him, excuse me, wrong player. Here we go. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he is by far the most versatile defensive player in the entire NBA. He received 17% of the votes. I think he should have received a little bit more votes given how competent of a perimeter defender he is, as well as a rim protector. And that kind of, his wingspan and his length on the court also impacts a lot of players whenever he's guarding them. And I feel like he's becoming a little bit of an underrated defender as the years go on, but part of that is also due to the Victor Wembanyama hype, which is very real. He ended up being tied for second place with OG Anunoby for 13% of the votes as the most versatile defender. Bam Adebayo was fourth with 10%. Drew Holiday, Jonathan Isaac, Herb Jones, and Jaden Daniels were all tied at fifth for 7% of the votes. And really, I have no problem with those defensive ratings from the GMs. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the GMs and their rankings. But back to what Manzano said in the chat, would you blame the Spurs' loss with Miami on LeBron, or is that the team around him? Yes, it's the team around him. Of course I'm going to blame that Miami loss on the team around him. Dwayne Wade averaged 15 points and 3 turnovers while averaging 2 assists. Chris Bosh only averaged 14 points, and the Spurs were shooting the lights out against that team. They were vastly outmatched, and LeBron was really the only solid player and the only player that elevated his game in the postseason. Meanwhile, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh played horrendously. And he also continues, do you think that's what hurts Bam? Oh, okay, so that's a completely different topic. So back on the defensive players, do you think that's what hurts Bam as a defender? A little defender that he can't be placed in one category. He's great at both perimeter and interior defending. It's really his height and the hype around Victor Wembanyama, because Victor Wembanyama can do exactly what Bam Adebayo can do, but he's 7'4" and can do it a lot better and is only expected to be better. Not to mention the presence of Rudy Gobert being a rim protector as well, and people sort of overrating him for how good the team plays defense. And I will say that, the reason why his team is ranked very high in the defensive category is because of him. I'm not saying that he doesn't have any value in that, but it's like putting Bam Adebayo in a solid defender when there's already defenders that are taller than him doing what he does, but a lot better and a lot more consistently. I don't think you can really consider Bam in that kind of conversation. Again, Victor can do essentially exactly what Bam can do, but a lot better. And what also hurts Giannis is injuries. I mean, I don't really know about that. He can't stay healthy in last few seasons. A lot of people, you see, when players get injured, it really depends on who gets injured. Because when Joel Embiid gets injured, a lot of people actually would flock to him and they would say oh, this is he got injured, it's not really his fault. But when Giannis gets injured, oh, he gets injured, it's his fault. And it's you see the double standard there? It's a little bit unfair. And yes, Giannis has gotten injured recently in his career at moments where he shouldn't be getting injured and at moments that are detrimental to his team, but that should not affect the fact that he is still a fantastic defender and a very solid overall defender for his team. So I don't really think it should. It might, but I don't think it should. And that's all that I really have to say, unless you have anything more to say in the comments. But that's all that I have. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the next segment, the fourth segment, which is going to be about Danny Green's retirement. before I do that, Manzano does have something else to say in the chat. And he says, I see the same thing with Joel. I'm consistent with my criticism. Joel's issues is his injuries, and he disappears in the playoffs. Yes. But Giannis doesn't disappear in the playoffs. If he disappears, it's because of injury, but he doesn't disappear in the playoffs. He has proven that he can be a fantastic playoff performer and lead his team to the promised land. So he's already accomplished that. Now, can he do it again? That's a different question. That's also going to be down to how well the team plays around Giannis and how well Damian Lillard can play in the postseason. Because Damian Lillard, while his reputation as a clutch playoff performer is relevant, that's not necessarily true. His only good playoff series was that playoff series against OKC when he made that half-court dagger in Paul George's face. Aside from that, he has underperformed in almost every single postseason that he's played in, and that gets shoved under the rug because of that incredible half-court shot that he made to close out a first-round series. So, also the first-round series against Houston when he hit that other clutch three-pointer. Again, those two clutch three-pointers are essentially what carry his reputation in the postseason, and we'll have to see if he can sort of amend that with the Bucks this season. I don't think that's happening because Doc Rivers is their coach, but that's besides the point. Now we're going to go ahead and go into Danny Green's retirement right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to be talking about Danny Green and his retirement from basketball. And before I do that, I do want to say, Anthony, if you are still in the chat, I do have a fifth segment lined up that is about the Miami Heat. If you're interested in that, I recommend tuning in until the very end and to see exactly what's been going on. It's about Jimmy Butler, so spoiler alert for those of you guys who want to listen to what happens in the fifth segment and what I'm going to talk about in the fifth segment. So, but that's not what we're here for. So in the fourth segment, we're going to cover Danny Green and his retirement. So, that is very embarrassing. I almost completely forgot to unmute the microphone. That is very, very embarrassing. I apologize for that. For any of you guys who have been listening through and just saw that I just had it on completely mute, I apologize for that. So, as I was saying, Danny Green, he recently announced his retirement. I'll go ahead and read the note again since I just screwed that up very badly. So, Danny Green, never imagined writing this letter even though I knew the day would eventually come. My life has revolved around the game, taking me all over the world and introducing me to incredible people. It's been one hell of a journey that I'm immensely proud of, and I couldn't have achieved it without the support of so many. I am who I am because of you, so thank you. And let me just go ahead and continue. And I couldn't have achieved it without the support of so many. I am who I am because of you, so thank you. And to all my friends, family, coaches, and teammates from high school, college, and the pros, to my wife and little one who have pushed me to be not only a great player but a better person each day, I hope I make you proud as I hang up this jersey and sneakers and officially step away from this game. And I'm excited for the next chapter and look forward to conquering new challenges. Signed, Danny Green. So, as I was saying, before I found out that I was on mute the entire time, which is a little embarrassing, first time that's happened in a while, actually. Danny Green, one of the very few players to win 3 championships for 3 different franchises. And he won his first championship with the Spurs, won his second championship with the Toronto Raptors, and then he ended up winning his 3rd championship with the Lakers. And he's also one of the few players in NBA history to beat LeBron in the finals and then win a championship with LeBron, or beat LeBron in the postseason at all. And another player that comes to mind is Rajon Rondo. He beat LeBron when he was on the Celtics numerous times, and he ended up winning a championship with the Lakers in 2020 along with Danny Green. So that's other players that have been noted for winning multiple championships with 3 different franchises. John Saley won it for the Pistons, the Bulls, as well as the Lakers. Robert Horry ended up winning a championship with the Rockets, the Lakers, and the Spurs. And, of course, LeBron James ended up winning 3 championships with 3 different franchises, also winning Finals MVP for all of those championships as well. He won it for the Heat, he won it for the Cavs, and he won one for the Lakers. So, obviously, just, fantastic. A very, very elite list to be a part of when you retire. And some could argue that he was like a bit of a scapegoat when he was on the Lakers, but still, no one can deny the value that he brought to both the defense as well as the three-point shooting. And while his career averages might not be like, whoa, all that impressive and like might not stand out, the 3 championships that he won are forever going to be legendary, and the 3 championships that he won with those 3 franchises are also legendary. I mean, being one of the shooters that helped the Spurs in beating LeBron in 2014 is something that everyone is going to continue talking about. The only championship that the Raptors ended up winning as a franchise, he was a part of that, so that is another part of his history, and that's another part of his resume embedded in the history of basketball. And then after that season, in the bubble, ended up winning the championship with the Lakers and LeBron James. So obviously, his career, it's been going very, very well. His career as a shooter and as a role player, he's proven that he is a competent role player. And you can't win. It's very difficult to win 3 championships, let alone with 3 different franchises. But everyone has a role to fill, regardless of whether or not they're the main option, whether or not they're a role player. They all have an important role to fill. And the fact that he was able to do that for 3 different franchises, in my opinion, nothing short of impressive. And a lot of people should be remembering him, not necessarily for his shooting woes with the Lakers, which might end up being why he gets remembered. I will say that while I am a LeBron fan, yes, there are some LeBron fans that go to an extent as insulting other players, despite maybe not deserving that kind of criticism, because when Danny Green missed that super important clutch shot that probably would have ended the series in Game 5 off of LeBron's pass, a lot of people were quick to criticizing him. And people were also quick to criticizing him when he was on Philly. And I don't really think that sort of criticism is warranted for somebody who has 3 championships. Yes, he missed a very important shot. That happens to everyone. And it's especially going to happen to the best of three-point shooters. I mean, Steph Curry misses clutch shots all the time. And I could do a whole segment on how Steph Curry is in clutch. But, I mean, missing like that one shot, it wasn't really easy. I will say, like, as somebody who was a LeBron fan, I was very, very upset at the fact that everyone was close to criticizing Danny Green and blaming him if they were going to lose, despite the fact that they were already up 3-1 in that series. Again, they could have closed out in that game, sure, but you have other games and other performances and other chances to win. It should also be noted that LeBron played phenomenally in both of those closeout games. But still, like, missing the three-pointer and missing a very important three-pointer, I mean, it shouldn't damage his legacy all that much. But Danny Green retiring, I mean, again, fantastic role player. There's not really much that can be said aside from the fact that he is one of these very few players that won multiple championships for multiple different teams. And it goes to show you, like, just the amount of value that he brings to a championship contending team, and the fact that good role players make good championship teams. That's something that is rather overlooked, in my opinion. Like, a lot of people, they think that a championship team is composed of your best player and your best second option, and which one of them is the better one. Yes, that does play a part, but you need a competent team. This is a team sport for a reason, and this is a team championship for a reason. You're not going to win any kind of championships if you don't have a solid team. It's just that simple. And really, that's sort of all that I have to say in this fourth segment, you know, talking about Danny Green and just his overall performance and just how fantastic he's been in these on these championship teams. So that's all that I really have to say about that. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the fifth segment, where Jimmy Butler reveals something a little bit tragic in the most recent Starting Five documentary. I recently pulled a quote from LeBron in the Starting Five documentary, and so now I'm going to go ahead and pull a quote from Jimmy Butler in this documentary, because I think it's very important, and it really shows, like, you know, a lot of the issues that the Miami Heat had in the previous season. And they were off-the-court issues. Now, it's not the kind of off-the-court issue that you guys think I'm talking about. It's a completely different thing that was out of both Jimmy and all of the Miami Heat's control. And I think it's a really important segment to talk about because it could lead to something great going into this season. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit tough to talk about, mainly because it happened to Jimmy Butler. And if Anthony's still in the chat, then this could explain sort of like a little bit of the reasoning why Miami was a little bit wasn't really playing towards everyone's expectations, and why Jimmy Butler had to take a bit of a hiatus before the All-Star break. Now, in the series Starting Five with Jimmy Butler, Anthony Edwards, LeBron, Sabonis, and Tatum throughout the season last year, in the series, Butler revealed that his father tragically passed away before the All-Star break. And he said, quote, "Right after All-Star break, my teammates really need me to be a lot better. And I want to always answer to that call. But I couldn't care less about basketball right now. I didn't care. it sucks to hurt. It sucks to lose people. And let's see, I didn't know what to do. No amount of money in the world could bring him back. Basketball, no matter how much I played it, couldn't fix that. And it's a very tragic thing, like especially like losing your father in a time that's very important to your team and your season. And a lot of people that at least I remember that Jimmy Butler, he said something about like taking the season a little bit more seriously, after the All-Star break, but clearly that was just a facade to try and hide the fact that this tragedy occurred. And when family tragedy strikes, and when any kind of tragedy strikes, it impacts a lot of people, and it could impact them in a positive way certain times. However, there are also times where it could impact people at a negative way in certain times. And I mean, we saw the death of Kobe Bryant impact the Lakers and winning the championship directly after he passed away. That's an example of it happening and benefiting a team. However, when it's somebody like your father, I don't really think that any sort of motivation that you might have into playing this season, I think that's all going to just become null and void after something like that happens. And I really feel bad for Jimmy Butler. I mean, I can't imagine losing my father, regardless of how old I am. And if that were to ever happen just randomly, like I feel like most of us would go through a similar stage of how should I say this? A similar stage of grief when talking about this and trying to continue to push forward and trying to just continue to do your job, because it's a very, very difficult job that Jimmy Butler's got to do. Not only does he have to maintain the morale and the support of his teammates, but he also has to maintain the morale and the support of his fans. A lot of people are watching him, and a lot of people are expecting him to do great things, especially in the postseason. But when something like this happens, it's really tough. I genuinely, it's really something that I cannot relate to, and I can only imagine just the amount of grief and the amount of pain that he was probably in, while still trying to maintain a positive image towards the media and still trying to sort of move on from this sort of thing. It came at a very bad time, because usually we're used to Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat taking the regular season a bit more seriously towards the end of All-Star break to avoid that play-in spot, or at the very least, not worry about the play-in. And something like this happening, it's really it could really mess you up. It really could mess you up. So I just wanted to let this be known. This is sort of the reason why Jimmy Butler this might have been the reason why Jimmy Butler just didn't really seem like he really cared about the season. And it makes, in hindsight now, makes more sense. It genuinely makes more sense. So I expect a revenge tour coming in from Jimmy Butler going into this season now. Honestly, I feel like the Miami Heat, they're going to do it again. They have a good chance to do it again. They have the right story, they have the right motivation, and they still have the right players. And, I mean, this is tragic, obviously, but I do think that they have a very solid chance. I sense a huge revenge tour coming in from Jimmy Butler, and he might pent up all of the how should I say this? Because there's no real guilt involved in this, because he didn't do anything to warrant this death, obviously. That would be crazy. But I feel a lot of the grief and a lot of the anger and a lot of the disappointments of last season is going to sort of propel this team forward and give this team the motivation that they need to get the job done. And again, this is a team that it's even when they're underdogs, a lot of people expect them to pull through and expect them to come out on top. So I expect a revenge tour coming in from Jimmy. That's all that I have to say. It's a little bit of it's definitely a much more darker segment to end it off with, so I apologize for that, but still very, very important to me, or in my opinion, excuse me. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment if you want your comments and or donations written and heard for in the next segment, gsmcpodcast.net. And if you don't want to use the link, that's fine. There's also Super Chat where you can send in your comments and or donations that way, and it's guaranteed to get featured on the show. Either or really helps the show and makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all that I have today on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson. Stay safe. Be sure to watch Thursday Night Football. I'm going to watch it. And as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.